Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for waiting for a few minutes. So welcome to the Isam Faris Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. My name is Rudaina Al-Baalbaki. I am the International Affairs Program Coordinator here at the Institute. Today's talk is going to be about life under the Islamic State organization according to its members and forgive the word I'm going to use, slaves. Niveen Afyouni conducted multiple interviews with ISIS members imprisoned in Baghdad. Some of those prisoners were held in the Buka camp prison in al-Qasr city that is located between the Iraqi and Kuwaiti borders. And you might be interested to know that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi himself was imprisoned in this Buka facility. I think it's sometime between 2004 and 2009. Correct me, Niveen, if I'm wrong. So additionally, she interviewed Yazidi women who were captives with ISIS and were unfortunately pushed into sex slavery. She will also discuss her visit to the front lines in Kirkuk. Niveen is currently the chief sub-editor in Sky News Al Arabiya. She has also worked for 5 years at the Al Arabiya news channel and was among its senior reporters, where she covered multiple conflicts and wars, mostly the Arab uprisings, US foreign policy towards the region, and Lebanon. So please help me welcome Niveen. Niveen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Before I start my presentation, I want to thank you all for being here. This is one of the great experiences that I've had investigating ISIS, and I would really love to share it with you all. I'm really honored to be here. When I chose to investigate ISIS, and I use the word investigation because it explains more of what I did. It's more than a research. And not because it's a selling topic. It was really personal. It was a personal interest in this vigorous amount of cruelty I was seeing daily due to the nature of my work in the news. I remember when I first told my professor, Professor Richard Schultz, he's a very well-known person in counterterrorism, and he's a consultant to the White House. I remember we were in Buenos Aires on a trip with the State Department and my school. And I came to him and I said, I want to do my thesis on ISIS. And he said, okay, what do you want to do about ISIS? I said, I want to know where this cruelty is all coming from. And he said, okay, you can do that. And he told me something that I didn't know before, and maybe if any among you were professors, they know that professors usually approve thesis proposals because they do need the research. And I didn't know this before. And he told me that he approved my proposal because he needed the research. So my starting point was to meet those members. Now, as a woman, I cannot just go and look for ISIS members and ask them that, oh, I want to interview you guys. I want to know why are you so cruel? Because I wouldn't be here today. Probably I would be a slave. So the only way to meet them legally was to meet the former members / prisoners. So I had to go to Baghdad. Because you know, when you do your thesis, and probably many of you do studies here, when you do your thesis, you have two choices. You either do it in the library and you can use the books, or you choose another part of it to do it in the field. And this is where you come with your own testimony, something that you could never forget. From my experience of meeting those members, many of them, they never regretted all the cruelty that they have done. I've met members that probably have killed 2,000 people in their lives. And they never showed me this sense of regret. Of course, they were handcuffed. I'll show you a picture later on through our debate. They were handcuffed. They didn't regret it. And they were trying to prove to me a point that we're going to talk about, that the Americans were the ones who made ISIS. And this is something that I don't believe in. I came out with my own conclusion that probably it's the Pentagon has warned the White House, but they were not aware how dangerous this organization could be. And this is not an organization. By the time that I did my research, that was in May 2015, my field research, they were a state. It's not an organization. see and I did something about the counterterrorism strategies, and you could find that the faults that they were done by the international coalition is because they dealt with ISIS the same way they were dealing with AQ, Al-Qaeda. And this is why they had so many faults in their counterterrorism strategies when it came to ISIS, because they were dealing with it the same way they were dealing with Al-Qaeda, and it's totally different. They're a very, very organized organization, a very organized one, that really operates like a state. And I'll tell you later more. I don't want to interrupt Rudaina's moderation and the questions and the angles that she wants to talk about. But you will know later, through the discussion, that this organization is totally different from Al-Qaeda, and we're going to talk about the differences between both, and I would really love to talk about it, because I don't agree that ISIS is just a continuation of Al-Qaeda. And in many hotspots in the world now, you could see that because these two organizations, these two terrorist groups are fighting, there are so many civilians that are dying, and it's not only through the strikes or through the suicide bombs, it's also the war between terrorist organizations themselves. Now, if Rudaina wants, I could start with a very short presentation. I hope this works well.
It's working.
Okay. Now, you all have read about ISIS. You know that it declares any non-practicing Muslim to be an apostate. And by the way, I had this debate with many colleagues back in Fletcher School in Boston who were defending Muslim Brotherhood and Sayyid Qutb. And they think that Sayyid Qutb is one of the most liberal Muslim ideologues, which I totally don't agree at all with. Because one of the things that Sayyid Qutb says was that all non-practicing Muslims, the same way that he believes in, are equal to an apostate. And that was in 1940s, I think. That back then, if you compare, he compared them to Israelis. And if you compare a Muslim to an Israeli back then, it means that you are telling people just to go and kill him or her. So this is one point, because Sayyid Qutb is one of the main ideologues in ISIS, the same way like Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Uthaymeen, and Mawdudi. I don't want to go through all of these people, because maybe you want to know more about the interviews with the members and between two parentheses, the slaves, unfortunately. I don't think, where's Bayan? I don't think it's opening. This one. One slide is not opening. Where's Bayan? Okay. So, you know, Abu Mus'ab Zarqawi, he is the main guy in ISIS. And so you all know Abu Mus'ab Zarqawi. He's the main guy in ISIS. Now, there's one debate that I've been through. I watched all the ISIS videos before they were taken out of the web, because I had to study these videos. And it's something not nice to watch these videos, but I had to. And due to my job, I have to watch these videos. We don't put them on TV, but we have to test if these videos are right or not. Now, if you want to start with the point where they burned the Jordanian pilot, it was right, they burned the guy, but they had some more effects on this video. From someone who has a TV experience, we know that they had more effect on the video just to show that there was a lot of fire and to add some drama to the video. But regarding the point of cruelty between ISIS and Al-Qaeda, there were letters that were sent from Zarqawi to Zawahiri to Zarqawi. And Zawahiri was against this amount of cruelty that AQ, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, was showing back then. There was no ISIS at that time. But Zarqawi was the most cruel person in this group. So, and he was not telling him, don't do any of these cruel parts of slaughter and burn. That was, of course, before the social media was there. We're talking like maybe more than 12 years back. He didn't tell him, don't do this cruelty. Like people sometimes defend Al-Qaeda. They say that Al-Qaeda is more utopian and it's not like ISIS, it's not cruel. It's not the same way. They just operate in a different manner. AQ believes that people should not see this amount of cruelty, because if they see this cruelty, they will stop believing in this ideology. So Zawahiri, he didn't tell Zarqawi, don't be that cruel and don't burn those people or don't slaughter them, don't do the hand lopping and anything else. He just told him, we're getting supporters away from our organization because you're showing these videos. Now back then, these videos were sent to Al Jazeera because it was the only place where Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden or Zawahiri or anything related to them was put on TV. It was through Al Jazeera channel. And of course through some web channels, but there was no social media back then so that these videos or this material would be so viral. And this is one point of the difference between these two groups. And I totally disagree, because many people have told me that AQ is not as cruel as ISIS is. It's just that they operate in a different way. And many American authors who have wrote about ISIS, they also believe that AQ is more of a utopian way to its supporters. And it's not like the cruelty that ISIS is showing. Again, they're not opening, by the way. بدك فوت على interviews? Okay, yeah, sure. So now Rudaina wants to know more about the interviews. So what do you want to ask me about the interviews? What do you want to know about the interviews?
So as I have said in the introduction, you have met ISIS members who were imprisoned in Baghdad and also in Buka camp. And we all read in newspapers how did the Buka camp affect the making of Daesh. So yes. I'd like to learn more about the effect of how did Sijin Abu Ghraib and Sijin Buka, this whole story of having terrorists being fled from this kind of prisons, and how did they get together later on to form Dawlat al-Islam في العراق and then Dawlat al-Islam في العراق والشام?
Okay, I'll tell you, it's not Abu Ghraib, it's mainly Buka camp prison. And as you said in the beginning, it's in the Qasr town. It's on the Iraqi-Kuwaiti borders. Now, I'll tell you 3 different stories from 7 prisoners that I've met in Baghdad. 3 of them were sent to Buka prison. And I remember one guy, his name was Abu Zainab. I'll show you his picture later. This guy named Abu Zainab, I had a big argument with him about religion and many other stuff related to this group. And he told me when he was 19 years old and the Americans invaded Baghdad, he held his weapons and he was fighting the Americans. Now, of course, all these prisoners are Sunnah. One of them apparently was a Shia. He turned to be a Sunnah and then he joined ISIS. I don't know why, but he did so. And this guy was the guy responsible for all the car bombs in Baghdad for a very long time. So back to Abu Zainab, he told me when he was 19 years old, he held his weapon, and he used to spend every summer in Beirut and to enjoy his time with his family in Beirut. And I said, how would you come to Beirut and turn out to be a very a fundamentalist? And he said that I had my weapon and I was trying to fight the Americans, and they put me back in prison. In prison, now this is his story. We don't know if it's right or not, but this is his story. Now, we have to remember that these terrorists are trying to make us believe that it's the US who created them, or Iran, or whoever. So his story says that when they went in prison, they were divided into cells. The Sunnah would be in one cell, and the Shia in another cell in the prison. And they would send preachers to stay with them. And he was telling me that these preachers, they were lecturing them about Islam, the way they see it. And they were making them memorize scripts for Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Uthaymeen, Mawdudi, Sayyid Qutb. And they had books. Now, I don't know how they got the books. This is also a question. But he said that the prisoners got them the books. Again, I don't know. We can never tell if this is the right story or not. It seems to be right, because I've heard it from many people and many investigators and many prisoners. And he was telling me at the end, what do you expect from a person who stayed in prison for 6 years? And he was being lectured on all those people. Do you want to convince me in 1 or 2 hours that what I was learning and what I was doing was wrong? And actually, he has a point. It was 6 years in prison, and this guy was being taught on everything, all what you could imagine of religious scripts from all these 4 ideologues that I've mentioned, which had a lot of effect in the creation of ISIS. There were other 2 guys, other than this guy, Abu Zainab. There was also one guy, he was working in Erbil, and he told me he had a very nice, lavish lifestyle, and one of his colleagues at work, he came to him and he said, your life is not right, you have to be more religious, you should not have a girlfriend, you should not drink. And he joined ISIS, and he told me on one of the attacks, suicide attacks, they sent him on one suicide attack, and there's a process to send people on suicide attacks, and no, they don't get drugs. They're not drugged, and they do believe in what they're doing. I've been asked this question many times, if those people are drugged, if they are aware of what they're doing. Yes, they are aware of what they are doing. Now, there is a process that they get into before going to the field to bomb themselves. And now this guy said that when he went, they sent him first to a mosque. And when he went to the mosque, of course, it's the Shia mosque. And when they sent him to the mosque, he said, I stood outside and I thought that it was the prayer time. And he was very young, and he said that it was the prayer time. And they call the prayer the same way that the Sunnah do it. And he said that I don't want to do it. So they punished him very badly in a camp, and they sent him again to a group of people where it was a mall. And he said that when they sent me in my car, I saw a lot of kids, and I thought, no, I don't want to kill those kids. So they stopped sending him, and they gave him very, very minor assignments in the group. If you want to know about the process of sending those suicide bombers, after being lectured for years on all these ideologies, when they want to send someone to do a suicide attack, they usually put them, now this is according to the prisoners, they put him in and of course it's a him, it's not a her, because in Iraq, they haven't sent women on suicide attacks. It only happened twice in Turkey. So anyway, they sent them to the camp. In the camp for 1 month, this person is totally disconnected from the world. Meaning, there's no internet and no phones, no TV, no radio, there's just nothing. It's a camp in a very rural area, away from everyone. They cannot communicate with anyone. And during this month, they only listen to Quran. Quran, but not the way that you like it from Egyptian sheikhs. It's the Wahhabi way of reciting Quran, which has a lot of monotone in it. So they listen to it.
Dr. Nukli likes it.
You really do like that? So they listen to it for 1 month, and during this month, they only eat burghul or some rice. They don't eat meat, just like the food where people who are fasting would eat. And after this 1 month, they send them to the place where they're doing the attack, but usually they don't know where they're going. And they wear this, the belt, yes, the explosives belt. If they didn't do it, now the head of the group, what does he do? He watches the news. If there was an attack that is scheduled to happen at 8:43 p.m., and at 8:43 p.m. he watches the news, let's say in Iraq, and nothing happens, if this guy doesn't do the attack, he would do it from his center, because they're connected through mobile. And this is how the attack does. So even if the person who doesn't want to do the attack, if he doesn't do it, his head of group or his supervisor in the group would do it. Now back to this guy who didn't do the 2 attacks. His name was Abu Sajjad. This guy, if he doesn't, when he didn't do it, he ran away from the place. He didn't stay in his place and he did it. He just left the whole place. So there was no point in doing it. This is what he told me. And they do wear the explosive belts for a certain reason. If the car is full of explosives, and the security was able to get the explosives, when they get the guy outside of the car, he could press the button and he would at least kill the security people. And this is why they wear the explosive belt. It's because they want as many casualties as they can, and this is the only way to do it. And those prisoners, I don't know, maybe they're executed by now, but why, do you know why the Baghdad government keeps them? Do you have any idea what do they do with these prisoners? Does anybody? Sorry?
Intelligence.
How?
Like you said, questioning them, see potentially where those camps are, so they can find out.
It's true. They make them wear security costumes, and they put them on a checkpoint. Now, if you've been to Baghdad, Baghdad is all about high fences and checkpoints. That's all what you can see in Baghdad. So they put them on checkpoints in cars, and they cuff their hands, and they make them wear security costumes. Now, at the checkpoint, whenever a car passes, they would question the person in the car if he knows the person passing or driving the car, and if the car could be filled with explosives or not. And this is how they caught many operations. They stopped them before they actually happened in Baghdad through those prisoners. This is how they can make use of them. Now, of course, they have no rights in that prison. That's for sure. And also, their prisoners as well, they keep questioning them, that's for sure, and able to know other people of the group. But the main way of making use of those people is just to put them on checkpoints. And all the prisoners that I've actually met, they have been sent on operations like that. They do put them on checkpoints, and they cuff their hands so they don't run away. And they might look like security guards at the checkpoint. So,
Thank you very much for these details, Niveen. I have a question, if you want us to keep doing the question answer, and we will later open the floor to the audience to ask their questions. So your starting point in your research, your question was, I think everybody here is here, attended this event, to understand where did Daesh come from. So was your assumption, your starting point, you were asking yourself about the role of ideology, for example, in the making of ISIS, because I have noticed that you have focused a lot on what role did play literature, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah and Sayyid Qutb, in the making of these terrorist suicide bombers, etc. So was this your question? You were asking yourself an ideological question. Did you ask political questions? Did you get to talk to these prisoners about what are the political reasons for them to be suicidal bombers, for example? What is the thing that is existing in the present and that they refuse this much that they want to explode themselves? Is it only because they read in Sayyid Qutb books? I mean, everybody has read in Sayyid Qutb books since Sayyid Qutb has published them in the latest trend. Why would Daesh happen Al-Qaeda happen in 2003 and then Daesh happen in reappear in 2011?
That's a very long question from many topics. No. I'll tell you. Okay, starting from where did Daesh come from? It's not only ideology, that's for sure. But I just want you to know something that I've noticed in my research, that those people do believe in what they're doing. It's not that they only went there for money, because many of them, they do have money. They're not poor. And every person has a different reason. The Westerners, the foreign fighters coming from Europe, have different reasons than the ones who join ISIS in Syria or Iraq. I will talk about the Westerners in another point, but starting with those...
Sorry, I was talking about the
The ideology.
and Syrians, because
Yeah.
of course a German, a lone wolf in Germany did not read Sayyid Qutb. I don't agree a lot with this.
No, the foreign fighters coming to Syria and Iraq, not the lone wolf
the
attacks.
European,
No.
European Daesh.
No, even those coming to Syria and Iraq, they have different reasons. Now, there are two ways of ISIS to attract their supporters and followers or members, let's say. It's either through fear, and this is what they do in Syria and Iraq, or they give them something in return. This is what they do with the Europeans or the Americans. Now, there are not much Americans, but it's mainly Europeans. What do they give the Europeans? I did a study on the difference between the French and the British. The difference between France and British when it comes to foreign fighters or those who have these, or the fundamentalists, let's say, there was one conclusion that I came to and I kind of believe in, that there's a big blame on the left parties in France because they try to, let's say, create something that is more national to France and not they try to kill those ghettos in France, like to have one same belief in France, whereas in UK they just left them in their ghettos, and this is one difference. Why would a French guy leave France and go to Syria and Iraq? Because they feel that they lost their identity. This is one of the reasons that I found, probably, for those, because there's no reason for them to go. Some of them have their jobs, but they feel that they don't have an identity, like some of the Moroccans or the Tunisians. Other thing is, if you go to someone in Europe, and this is based on case studies that I've done and I've read. If you go to someone who doesn't have a job, and you tell him that I'm going to give you money without working, and I'm going to give you a real weapon, you can kill real people with this weapon, and of course he's a psychopath. And I'm going to give you a lot of women as much as you want. He would definitely leave his place, if he's a psychopath, of course, again, and he would go anywhere to do that. And by the way, most of those foreigners, they do die in Syria and Iraq because they don't know how to deal with the geology of the place. It's not like the Arabs. Now, if we want to talk more about the ideology, it's not only the ideology, but again, those people do believe in what they are doing. And those people, the ones in Syria and Iraq, they were lectured and for so many years and so many months about Sayyid Qutb, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Uthaymeen, Mawdudi. It's unfortunate that many of the books that they get lectured on have won prizes in many Arab countries. If I could tell you some of the books, you could go and research and you could find them in the market. And you could find that these books have taken prizes in some Arab countries. My main reason about ideology, I have a belief that if you want to look in Islam, you don't look only to the Quran. There's a whole Muslim heritage of books and social norms from the Arab Peninsula. It's not only the Quran. It's true that you could find people who could tell you that Quran doesn't say that slavery is okay, but Quran haven't forbidden slavery very clearly. And this is why if you sit with someone from ISIS or Al-Qaeda and you tell them that slavery is haram, it's not right in Islam, they would get you a verse from Quran and they would tell you that, no, get me just one verse in Quran that says that slavery is not okay, or we cannot do slavery, we cannot practice it. They believe that the slavery of women is like a prize for the warriors. For them, they are warriors at war, and they have to give them prizes after the war. And this is one way, because women and children, now when they do an attack, and this is also in Islam, in Islamic history, when they do the attack, they kill the men, and they keep the women and the children, and they take all the gold or whatever, the land, of course. And it's up to Khalifa or the commander-in-chief of the whole organization to decide what he wants to do with the women and the children. And usually with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, he takes some certain number of women and children, for himself. So this is what happens with those women, and they believe that slavery is okay in Islam. I also want to mention another thing about my trip to Iraq. I also went to the battlefield in Kirkuk. And before I get you through the battlefield, I've met the head of operations in Kirkuk, because I went to the battlefield, and he showed me documents he's Kurdish, of course, and you know the thing between the Kurds and the Arabs. He showed me documents of Arabic tribes selling Yazidi women for $14 each. And he believes that the Arabic tribes have betrayed them in Mosul, and they sold the Yazidi woman for $14. And he showed me pictures of those Arabic tribal chiefs, and he said that they're trying to attack them. They're trying to kill them. So this is also a story that I think I believed in it because I've seen documents, and I would not be surprised if this happens, because in Mosul, when ISIS took over Mosul, it's not only that all of it was by force, that people had no choice. Of course, they cooperated with this organization, whether we like this fact or we don't, but they did cooperate with this organization. Otherwise, if they were a small number of people, they cannot overtake all this big city. So I do believe in this side of the story as well. Now, I want to show you something very interesting, which is the pictures that I do need Bayan, by the way. Bayan. I have to open my email ولا صور. Did I answer your question about ideology or not?
I still have a follow-up question, but
after continue the questions.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, I was talking about Kirkuk, I think. I wanted to show you the pictures in the battlefield. There was something very interesting in Kirkuk. Now, you know the Kurds, the Baghdad government doesn't give them fighter jets. They don't give them planes. So they only give them very small missiles, but they don't give them planes to fight. Because if they give them planes, they could take over the place that they're taking back. And by the time that I was in Kirkuk in May 2015, the Kurds were starting to take land from ISIS. And Barazani, if you remember, he said that all the land that the Kurds will take from Kirkuk are not going to give it back to Baghdad government. And actually this happened. The Kurds were taking over a lot of land from Kirkuk. And I had a drive in this place, but they never returned it to Baghdad. So while there, the 2 attacks were done by the international coalition against ISIS. They were done by the US when I was in the battlefield. It was just maybe 2 or 3 kilometers away, but I'll show it to you in the photo. So I asked Dr. Kamal Kirkuki, is the guy who I met in Kirkuk, and he was the head of operations in Kirkuk. And I said, how do you cooperate with the Americans on attacking ISIS? Because we were in a place where, after that, by 2 kilometers, ISIS was still there in Kirkuk. And he said that they just coordinate with them. They know where ISIS is, or where they have weapons, they could just know that there are a lot of weapons there, and they could coordinate with the Americans. The Americans do the attack and they leave, and this is what happens. So it's all through the coordination between the Peshmerga and the US forces. This is how it happens in Iraq. It's not that the Americans would actually, all of them know, because there are signals that come from the field for them to know where it's coming from. What is that? Does anybody want to ask me something about anything that I have talked
I
about?
was thinking that it's the time to open the floor to the Q&A. So please raise your hand if you have a question. Dr. Tariq would like to ask a question.
First, before Dr. Tariq asks a question, I want to say something about Dr. Tariq. Dr. Tariq, I cannot thank him enough because he was one of 2 people who sent recommendation letters to my school in Boston, Fletcher School at Tufts University. And he wrote very nice things about me in the paper, so I got accepted at Fletcher School and I was able to do this study to get my degree there. So I really thank him so much. I caused him trouble because he was in Libya and I had to send him with the post, and it took a long time, it was hard. But yes, I'm really happy that you are here today.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to see you. It's good to have you here. I'm pleased that you have successfully completed your research. I have 2 questions. I know the answer to the first one in a way, but let me. Most literature about Daesh refers to the fact that it's a group composed, it's somehow heterogeneous. There are radical Islamists in Daesh, but there are former Ba'athists, former tortured prisoners, there are psychopaths who had come to Daesh from either mental illness or from petty criminality rather than from Islam. And there are profiteers, opportunists, of all sorts. Now, it looks like, I'm sorry for not having been here the first 10 minutes of your talk, it looks like you were more interested in those who are committed radical Muslims.
But part of my research was how did
So it would
this
be interesting
organization started. I spoke about the former.
To hear you describe the profile of people who have come to Daesh, but did not come from Salafi Islam or from Islam, but came from elsewhere, from Ba'athism, from opportunism, from mental illness, from petty criminality. And my second question is simpler. You mentioned, and I think as rightly said, that not that I defend Ibn Taymiyyah as a Qutb, I'm not a Muslim brother, as you yes.
I wouldn't say
but I'm not sure these people have learned a lot from neither Ibn Taymiyyah, and maybe some parts of Ibn Taymiyyah, but I think there is another literature that might have influenced them, and I would like to know more about it. I mean, إدارة التوحش of Abu Bakr al-Naji, the writings of Mas'ad al-Suri, I think these have more influence on the minds of these people than Mawdudi, Sayyid Qutb.
No.
Do you agree? Disagree?
I
so
do agree in a way, but before I answer your second question, I'll go back to your first question about the former Ba'athis. When I started this, I spoke about the way that ISIS operates. ISIS does operate like a state, which takes you back to the belief that there are former state people who are running this organization. Where did ISIS start? It started in a place where there was water and oil. It's a place where they would have natural resources, and they were selling the oil, of course, in the black market. So they were having their own resources of money. And this is one way that leads you to the conclusion that, yes, there are former Ba'athis, but why did these former Ba'athis join ISIS is the question. They joined ISIS because some get it back to Maliki. Maliki in Iraq, many people believe that he was the reason why the Sunnah have all joined the radical groups. Because he was, you do remember all those protests that went in Mosul before ISIS took over the city. And there's a big blame on Maliki. And actually, this is why the Americans said that enough with Maliki. And this is why Maliki lost power. So there's a big blame on Maliki that the Sunnah felt that they don't have weapons They're out of power. They're not politically in power. They're not in the government. They're not ruling. And the only way to have it was to join radical groups. This was the only way. This explains why former Ba'athis were there. Plus, what I know is that those former Ba'athis were killed after ISIS took over Mosul. They're not alive anymore. They're not operating in the organization anymore. And this is according to information from US intelligence. They do believe that these former Ba'athis have all been killed. They're not there anymore. After the organization took over Mosul, they're not there. Did I miss something in your first question? About the Islamic literature?
No, profiteers, delinquents,
20
psychopaths.
of the ISIS leaders, 19 of them were in Buka camp prison. 19 of the 20 leaders in ISIS were in Buka camp prison. And this does explain a lot on what they have been taught in the prison, or what they have been left to be taught in prison with those preachers in the prison. About the psychopaths, yes, most of them are the ones who come from Europe, actually. And you asked about Ibn Taymiyyah, right? Ibn Taymiyyah, when you research Ibn Taymiyyah, you find two things. In the first stage in his life, Ibn Taymiyyah showed this very cruel side of his beliefs. And at the end of his life, he said that he did a mistake and he should not have done that. But actually, all radical groups, they do take the first conclusions or the first studies that he has done. They don't take the other part. Back to Sayyid Qutb, they do take from Sayyid Qutb in the way that, in political Islam, in the way they run the state. This is more where they rely on Sayyid Qutb. Because Sayyid Qutb is different than Taymiyyah in the way of running a state. Ibn Taymiyyah is more of the ideology of Islam. So but they do rely on these two a lot. All of them, they have told me this. And they told me about many books that they read in prison about these two, actually.
I read that, but I've never seen
In Dabiq, no, why? Because they don't want people to think that they're going back to the same ideologues that Al-Qaeda was relying on. Because they want to show people in Dabiq that they are different from Al-Qaeda. And Dabiq, yes, that's what I think. And by the way, Dabiq, if any of you have got into this very lavish magazine of ISIS, Dabiq, in every, I think the last two issues, they haven't mentioned yes, exactly, yes, a lot. They try to show that they are stronger than Al-Qaeda. They would give back the glories of Islam, and this is how they sell their ideologies. Jihad is only a way to rationalize war against others. If this terrorist group wants to rationalize the war against others, they use the word jihad, because this is the only way to get supporters.
It's a political usage of the word.
Yes, of course.
Religious and ideological.
No. See, the heads of ISIS, of course, they have a political way of running this organization. But if you go back to supporters or those people whom I've met, all of them, they believed in what they were saying. In the room with us, there were so many people from the Iraqi intelligence and the prosecutors and a lot of people, and none of them said that I do regret what I have done. None of them. They all said that if they go back to the field, they would do the same thing that they were doing. So it's not that they were doing it for money. Now, of course, there are people who do it for money, and there are psychopaths, and there are people who do it for women. There are people who do it for weapons. It's just different reasons of so many people. But politically, which Dabiq is using it, the word jihad is just to rationalize and legalize among its supporters all the attacks. Because one supporter would come and say, why did you do this attack in the mall in Baghdad, and all the ones who were killed were women and children? And I asked this question, what was the use of doing such an attack when all the casualties were women and children? And he answered me that those women and children, I said, how do you know if they were Shia and Sunnah? And he said, of course, the Shia would go to hell, and the Sunnah, because they died for the cause of killing the Shia, they will go to hell, to heaven. He just legalized everything for me as if that he has a statement on this, and he believes in it. In Islam, there is something in Arabic, I would say it. It's when the people die, they are like a shield for those who, like if the Sunnah die. لا نسيت I forgot it. كأنه it's like a shield. Those Sunnah are like a shield for others, the Shia who are apostates for ISIS, by the way, to be killed. And this is why they do such attacks. So they always have a justification for every action that they do. If you are interested in ISIS, I really strongly advise you to read Dabiq, if you haven't read this magazine. I think Clarendon Project, if it was blocked here, I don't know if it's blocked, but where I live, it's blocked, so I had to go through Clarendon Project to check it. It's very interesting, the way they use the photos. It's a very lavish magazine, like any style magazine. And in every issue, they write something about women and slavery. I think the last two issues, they haven't mentioned something about if they are slaves or prostitutes. And this is a question that they asked in one of the issues, if those women are slaves or prostitutes. You haven't asked me about the stories of those women. If you hear their stories, it's really heartbreaking. But many of those women, they just sell her from one person to the other. They just don't keep her with one person. The women who I've met, most of them just ran away from ISIS. Or their families paid a lot of money to smuggle them. There was one woman, I would never forget her face or her story. In my study, I use different names for their, because I'm not allowed to use their names. But there was one woman, she had two daughters. One was 7 and one was 5. And she said that they sold her in a market in Mosul. And she went to one guy, and then they sold her to the other guy. And she was afraid to run away. But why did she run away? She was in a house with 2 other women. And there was one guy who was raping one of these women, and when he finished from raping one of them, he wanted to start with her daughters, who were with her in the room. And this is when she had the courage to run away from the place where she was. So this is why they wrote in one of their issues if they are prostitutes or slaves, because they sell them from one person to the other. And I asked this guy I've met, one of the prisoners, I said, do you think that they would make these women come to Islam if you do that? You're giving them a very bad figure on Islam. And he said that, yes, they will come to Islam by force. In one of the issues of Dabiq, there is one very interesting article that they wrote. And they said that they strongly believe that women, through slavery, I don't know how this would happen, but this is what they say. Through slavery, they would know the right way to Islam. And this is just crazy, and I don't know if there is a proper word to describe it, actually, but the sorrows of those women, by the way, they don't end. I met them in Khanki camp in Erbil, the Yazidi women. And their sorrows, they don't end in the camp because they are completely rejected by their societies. They're not accepted. It's the same thing that happened with Boko Haram in Nigeria. All those women who came pregnant and they have children, they live in shelter camps by the UN because they're not accepted from their society. And they don't know who the fathers of their children are.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you now to get back to the Q&A.
But I didn't answer his second question, I think. I forgot what was the second question. Can I show them the pictures before you get to the question?
Go ahead.
Yeah? Now, this is one of the prisoners. His name is Abu Abdullah. And I think this guy killed over 2,000 people. He was the head of the car bomb operations in Baghdad in ISIS. And he was a Shia, and he turned to Sunnah. And then he joined ISIS. He was not very talkative. And I asked him about his family. Why did he leave his family? Does he think that he killed any member of his family? And he said, I don't know where my family is. So he seemed very careless to know. And this guy is Abu Zainab. Actually, when this guy came into the room, there was a very small table with a fruit plate and a knife. And this guy, when he came in, of course, all of them were handcuffed. So one of the people there in the prison, he came, he removed the table and the knife, and he put them away. And I asked him, why did he do that after the interview? He said, because once he attacked one of the interviewers, so they don't want this guy particularly. And they didn't want, now this guy was very well educated on ISIS ideology. And he had a justification for every question. I think I interviewed this guy for more than 3 hours. Yes, so this guy was the most interesting one, actually. And of course, they would not know my name. If you ever go and meet those people, don't let them know your name, because you never know when they are out, and they could hunt you if they are, because they're all psychopaths. So just be careful.
Are they psychopaths, or they know what they're doing?
They are psychopaths because they would run after you if you interview them, but they do believe that they have to run after you.
Okay.
This is the thing. Now, this place is in Kirkuk, few days after the Peshmerga, and if you read here, it says Mahjuz al-Dawla al-Islamiyya, which is like taken by the ISIS, Islamic State. Now, every building that they take, they write their name on it, and look at this here. There's a saying by Bukhari written on the wall. This all is in Kirkuk, and these are the Peshmerga. Now, while I was there in the battlefield, these two attacks happened. So this is a picture of one of these two attacks that I told you about earlier. Now, this is Dr. Kamal Karkouki. He's the head of operations. After this fence, the small one, is all ISIS. There's a small land that is more of a desert, and then like in 1 kilometer, probably, there's ISIS. Yeah, this is also from Kirkuk. So yeah, these are some of the pictures.
Thank you very much, Nadine. I bet you had a great time.
It was interesting and not great, actually, but it was interesting.
Sorry, but I had hands raised before. I'm so sorry, Muhammad. Michael, I'll go to Michael, and then...
I had 3 things. First of all, I'm a bit worried about citing the Clarion Project as a rapidly Islamophobic organization with ties to the Israeli settlement movement. That's before people read the Clarion Projects and Supplanted, I just thought everybody should know that. Secondly, you mentioned that the original territories that Daesh took over were the oil-rich provinces, or the oil-rich areas in which they gathered revenue. But as far as I'm aware, the majority of oil deposits in Iraq are primarily based around Basra and Kirkuk. And the main strongholds of Daesh are in Al-Anbar, Fallujah, and Ramadi. And this has always been one of the perennial questions if we ever decide to if Iraq ever becomes a federal state, if Iraq, of course, if Iraq has decided to split the province. So I'm curious on what basis that claim was made. And then thirdly, perhaps a better word than, I don't know, I feel like a better word than justification might be following up on Rudaina and Dr. Mitri's point. They talked about Ibn Taymiyyah and Sayyid Qutb. Abu al-Maududi, it's difficult to utilize his thinking for this type of behavior because the organization that he founded, the Jamaat al-Islami, they play the political game, and they play it very successfully in Pakistan. So I feel like utilizing Abu al-Maududi to justify these types of actions is not justification as much as it is self-delusion as to what the actual content of what he was saying was. So
Thank you, Michael. Please go ahead.
I just have a question. Did they treat you any different because you were a woman?
They didn't dare to.
They didn't dare to.
They didn't have the chance to dare to do that.
Also,
Now, some people ask me if I was wearing a veil. I'm like, these are terrorists. Why would I wear something on my headscarf?
But were they, perhaps, did they answer in a less honest manner, or did they were they less respectful than they might have been?
Okay, thank you for your question. Let me just finish the round of questions and take maybe 2 more questions. Yes, please.
في عندي سؤال بالعربي، ممكن بالعربي إذا ما في إزعاج. في عندي تعليق، يعني أنا أول شيء بتشكر حضرتك على الصورة الواضحة والعلمية عن الوضع. يعني في شغلة بالنسبة للإسلام، حكيتي حضرتك عن العبودية، إنه ما في شيء واضح بالإسلام بيلغي العبودية. هذا شيء يعني أنا بختلف معك بهالموضوع، خاصة إنه سيدنا محمد لما يعني حرر العبد يلي هو بلال وأصبح مؤذن الرسول. هذا دليل على إنه الإسلام ضد العبودية، والدليل إنه هذا بلال هو مؤذن الرسول. وفي آيات، أنا مني ضليع يعني بالإسلام يعني كعلم شريعة، إنما عندي ثقافة. يعني مثلا إنه في آية بتقول إنه يعني أقربكم إلى الله أتقاكم، يعني ما بيميز بين اللون والعبودية وغيره. هذا أول مداخلة أنا بحب أعملها. الشغلة الثانية، أنا يعني عندي مطالعات، أنا أساساً ضابط متقاعد. بفترة التقاعد تعمقت حتى أفهم منين أتت يعني داعش، عقيدة داعش، لأنه ما في شيء بالإسلام يدفع للقتل والعنف. يعني مثلا أول شيء بيقول إنه يعني الدين الإسلامي لا إكراه في الدين. الدين الإسلامي الحقيقي هو القرآن وهو الاعتدال. هلا الأفكار المتطرفة، أنا عملت قراءات كتير لأفهم من أين أتت عقيدة داعش، هالعقيدة المتطرفة. من خلال مطالعاتي تبين لي إنه في تيارين بالإسلام، يعني بالإسلام السياسي في تيارين مختلفين، يلي هو التيار السلفي التيار السلفي يعني أحمد بن حنبل، ابن تيمية، ومحمد بن عبد الوهاب. والتيار الثاني يلي هو بالقرن العشرين مع الإخوان المسلمين، حسن البنا وسيد قطب.
أنا كثير ما بوافقك بالرأي إنه هن يختلفوا عن بعض بالوقت
يعني أنا بدي نعم نعم بدي أوصل لشغلي إنه اللي اخترع عقيدة داعش عمل ميكستشر، خلط، أخذ أفكار من السلفية وأفكار من الإخوان المسلمين سيد قطب ومزجهم ببعض، وتولد من هذا المزيج كوكتيل مولوتوف يلي هو داعش.
أنا بس بدي أعلق على نقطة كثير مهمة. أنا أبداً
بس نرجع نكفي راوند ثاني من الأسئلة.
The gentleman asked me about slavery and Islam. Now, I never said that Islam supports slavery at all. I never said that. And I want to make this very clear. Otherwise, I would find some people haunting me for this. I didn't say that Islam supports slavery. But if you go through the Quran, you don't find a very clear verse that says that slavery is haram. You don't find that. And even if you sit with ideologues and people who are into Sharia, I'm not into Sharia, but this is the part that I really tackled, you don't find a very clear verse that says that slavery is haram. You find other clear verses about give the man 2 parts of what you give the woman if she inherits something. But you don't have something very clear. And it should be more clear, but of course, the Prophet or all the people living in Islam and Umar ibn al-Khattab, ila akhirihi, all of them, they did support to free slaves, but they didn't say don't slave them. They just supported freeing them. And this was one point that they defended. I'm speaking about what ISIS members were saying. And yes, they defended that. They said that nothing says that slavery is haram in Islam. You can slave the women and the children because they are a prize of war. Those men were fighting in the battlefield and they deserve a prize. If they win, they have to take what's left over. So this is what the reason was.
On the second point the sir was making is that he thinks that I'm not really comfortable about talking about Islam as a religion because we don't have among us someone who is really...
Yes, I don't want either.
But the gentleman has said that the version he understands Islam as a religion of peace and not of violence. But then again, the point here is not to judge Islam. The point is to judge or to study or to examine the referral of Daesh members to ideology and to the Quranic text and to Islam or to the saying of Prophet Muhammad related by Bukhari. So the point, not to lose the point, making an examination of Islam is not possible now, but the referral, how about the referral of how many of the members that you have met has referred to Islam? And why, to go deeper, why would they refer to Islam in your opinion? Did you feel it was genuine referral, or it was for political reasons? It was because the point I'm trying to make, Dean, is that okay, there is violence in this traditional literature of Islam, fine. But why don't we look, for example, as a reason to the referral to a violence that was written and prescribed all these centuries ago, to the contemporary literature, contemporary violent literature that is still ongoing in Iraq and Syria. I'm talking about Al-Ba'ath al-Iraqi and Al-Ba'ath al-Suri. So,
no, Ba'ath al-Iraqi is still not operating anymore.
Talking about the practices and the Ba'athist military men who were imprisoned in Tuqatif, they are still بعدهم this ideology.
No, I'll tell you one thing. I don't want to talk about religion, but how did religion spread in the world? They did spread through violence. No, there was part of it that was violent through all religions. There was violence. There was weaponry. There were the people who died. All religions have spread this way, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know
when okay. Anyway.
I'm a political scientist. I'm not a theologian or any.
Well, me neither. But this is what I know for a fact.
I try to look at political regimes. I try to look at social science, things that I can explain by the data that I have.
You asked if they were referring to Islam.
Yes.
Of course, because this is the only common thing that everybody would agree on from their supporters.
So they all referred to Islam. So they confirmed your assumption that Daesh is an ideological...
No. This is not my assumption. This is not my assumption. But if you want to tackle the roots of ISIS, you have to go through historically to the Islamic heritage. This is the only way to tackle ISIS and the roots of ISIS. Now, if you tell me... to Michael's question.
Michael's question.
Yeah. Michael, I want to show you this map. And this is why I opened it. You asked me, why did I have this conclusion of ISIS taking over oil and water? Now, this is the land this is June 2014, and this is June 2015. And look at the land. It includes Anbar, it includes Tadmor, of course Mosul is there, and Fallujah as well. Yeah. And this is between the two rivers of Dajla and Furat. Yeah? Why do you think they went there?
Why? Because it was territory available to be conquered.
Why is this territory available? Why would they go to this territory? Of course there are Sunnah there. This is one important fact.
Resources.
But there are resources as well. This is how they can fund their state.
When they started, and I assume when you say when they started, you mean 2006, when Abu Musab al-Zarqawi declared the Islamic State.
No, when they started not as an organization. They started making attacks back then. It was not a real organization until two years back, when all of a sudden, when they were taking land, the Iraqi military was just leaving the weapons and running away. If you go back to the fact, actually the Peshmerga were the only ones who were able to take land from ISIS. The Iraqi military, until maybe now, if we go 4 months back in Mosul, the western Mosul and the eastern Mosul, after they finished with the eastern Mosul, now they started 4 weeks ago with the western Mosul, it was the Iraqi military. But before that, they were leaving their weapons in the field and they were running away. And you could see videos and pictures of that. It's not my own assumption, it's a fact. So they had the weaponry, and it's very cynical because these weapons were from the international coalition, given to the Iraqi military. And when they went on an operation, they would leave everything and then they would run away because of this amount of cruelty that was promoted by ISIS.
My question here, Naveen, is why weren't there any Iraqi army to fight Daesh? I mean, isn't it a state-building issue? 10 years under
Of course.
Nur al-Maliki, and they did not manage to build an army
because-
to hold on Mosul
Because
for
they
6
were
hours.
refusing to give weapons to the Sunnah. And this is why Sunnah in Iraq, they joined ISIS and they felt they were out
So there are
of everything.
structural and political reasons to why Daesh did flourish. And if I may ask you here a question that is very important. You mentioned in the beginning that counterterrorism ideas should look at Daesh differently than it should look at Al-Qaeda. Because Daesh is a pseudo-state, it calls itself a state. And did you try to imply that Daesh has some kind, the governance that Daesh has imposed on these territories has some kind of legitimacy among the locals?
It has, because they, through fear and force.
Yeah.
It's not that everyone in Mosul or in Raqqa or in Fallujah, they all welcomed ISIS. No, it's not like that. It's fear.
Yeah.
It's fear among civilians who have, they are not part of the power, they're not part of the government, they don't have weapons. So they were left with this choice. I'm not defending them at all, because they have done so many actions against Christians, they have done so many actions against the Yazidis, the Arabic tribes in Mosul. They are to be blamed for these actions, because they were part of it. I'm not trying to defend them or to justify what they have done, but this is a reason that you could say that forced them to join ISIS. There are always reasons for a criminal to do a crime, right? I'm not justifying the reason, but I tried to know why did they join this organization. And Maliki, of course, is a very, very, very major reason, and this is why he's out of power now. The Americans just said that he definitely has to be out of power, because he left after the war was over. There was a deal made between the Iraq and the Americans that they would put the Sunnah in the power. They would be part of the power. It's not that they would be excluded. Like the Shia were excluded when Saddam was there, and now the Sunnah are excluded when Saddam was not there. So there was a deal done between the Iraqis and the Americans. But when Nur al-Maliki came to power after Alawi was when he was a prime minister, he was supported by all the Arabs, actually. But when Nur al-Maliki came and there was a deal made, but he didn't oblige to the deal, actually. And this was a reason why everybody blames Maliki. It's not Naveen blaming Maliki,
Yeah,
but it's
a
many,
narrative.
yes,
Narrative.
yes.
So power sharing is one of problems in power sharing in Iraq, must be one of the reasons why we have witnessed such a rise of Dawla Islamiyya in Iraq and then Daesh. Hamad, you had a question?
Yeah, well, it's just a curious question. Naveen, you couldn't manage, it was impossible for you to park your car in the UB campus. How did you manage to reach Buka prison?
No.
For the boss.
I should have asked this question. No, you don't go to Buka Camp Prison. Buka Camp Prison is closed. You meet prisoners who were in Buka Camp Prison.
Where are they now?
They are either free with ISIS, or I've met them and they are executed by now, probably. So you don't go to Buka Camp Prison. It's closed. There's no point in going there.
Okay, one question from behind. Hi.
Hi.
Your name, please.
Hi, my name's Awesome.
Hi.
I want to ask you a question. The fact that they call themselves the Islamic State, does that give us an insight on their ideology becoming a form of mutation of nationalism? Could we see
My
that?
ideology?
No, they're ISIS, since they call themselves as the Islamic State.
Yes.
Can we see that nationalism is a part of their ideology, since they're trying to make a nation or a state or an identity, or at least a new form of nationalism?
Actually, it's not a new form of nationalism because the main reason that they say that ISIS operates to bring back the glories of Islam. This is when you read all their literature, you find that they always justify everything they do because they believe that this is the only way to get the glorification of Islam, and getting it back to how it was 1,000 years back is only through power and taking over land and people and money and finding these resources and causing harm to the Westerners because they believe that the Westerners are the reason of everything. Now, but there's a question. Why is this rise in radicalization in the Middle East? There's a question that I asked myself. Why are people turning out to be radical in the Middle East? Actually, it was after the failure of the leftist parties and the collapse of the Soviet Union and the failure of democracy that was brought into Iraq. This is why people turned out to radical organizations. This is the reason behind it. Because democracy, I do believe personally that democracy is you practice democracy. It comes from within the society. You cannot come and impose it after a few years. You can have it in the country. It comes through practice. If you go to someone in Sweden or in Norway and they have their own form of democracy, you cannot bring it now and apply it here because it's come through practice of different generations. Now, this democracy that was brought to Iraq failed, a very big failure in Iraq. Plus, before that, the leftist regimes of Abdel Nasser who oppressed the Muslims as well as the leftists in Egypt. So this was also a bad example for the Arab youth. The only thing that was left that promised them of glorification was the radical organizations. And actually technology helped them a lot. ISIS had made a very big use of technology of the 21st century to bring us back to the medieval ages. So this is a very cynical thing, but actually it's real. They're using this technology to bring us back, 1,000 years back. So this is my own analysis to what I hope I answered your question.
The lady over there had a question.
Hi, my name is Dina Hashim. I'm an English student. You've mentioned in your talk male IS fighters, but I was wondering about the role of
Male
women.
IS fighters?
Yeah, like male fighters in the Islamic State.
Yes.
I was just wondering, what is the role of women in the Islamic State? And like, are they just victims or are they rewards? What's their role? Like, it hasn't been discussed really, so I'm really interested. Thank you.
Okay, Women for ISIS was also part of my research. Now, they are not only rewards. They use them for different reasons. One, they use them to attract men. If those women were married, they would ask the women to convince their husbands to join ISIS. Plus, there is also another role of women who come from the West to come and join the organization in Iraq and Syria, and many women were trapped there. They could not go back. I think you've heard of the story of the two Austrian sisters who couldn't get out of Syria. I think they were in Syria. So they use women for different reasons. The Muslim women who join ISIS, the members are not like the slaves for them. The members are the ones that they use them to, they call it the da'wah, to spread the da'wah of Islam and to help people join ISIS. The married ones, they ask them to convince their husbands or their brothers or to send their sons to join the organization. Whereas the non-Muslims are the prize after a battle or somewhere in the field for the fighters. But those women that you're talking about, they do believe in the slavery of women. And actually those women who are members in ISIS and the senior ones are the ones who train the slaves, the women slaves, on dealing with their owners. I'm sorry to use this term, but this is what they use with their owners. And they are the ones who apply the punishment on the ISIS women if they made a mistake. They are the ones who say that these women should be stoned, of course, the senior ones. So they have different roles in the organization. And it's, by the way, the role of women in ISIS is much more important than the role of women in Al-Qaeda. Women didn't have a big role in Al-Qaeda as much as women have a role in ISIS. So
that's ironic, but
yeah.
So,
Yeah, they're open-minded.
yeah. They vote more to
They
women's
do.
rights. Thanks for their contribution. Sir, please.
Chad Radishak with ARC. First, I wanted to just say that to defend your point about Ibn Taymiyyah and Qutb and so forth, there was an article in Ramia that was titled something along the lines of the scholars of old and their books will be your lead guide. You know their fancy titling. At any rate, they directly took excerpts from Taymiyyah, so that will help your case.
Thank you.
But at any rate, what I'm interested in is kind of the idea of economic and sexual inequality in the sense that, like, if you're an ISIS fighter, you could have, several wives and a bunch of, as we mentioned, unfortunately, slaves. But what about either other men who are maybe less skilled fighters? Does this sow dissent?
They take a less salary.
Right. How does this affect interactions between men within Islamic State territory, and also what is their social incentives for taking on wives when they can acquire slaves so cheaply?
I'll tell you one thing. What do you think is the reason behind ISIS promoting the idea? If you look at their magazine, in every issue you would find a profile on one of a foreign fighter. Why do you think they do promote this idea of, we're able to get foreign fighters? Because they want to convince their supporters everywhere in the Arab world or the Islamic world that they are a legitimate state, that you see this guy is coming from Norway, she is coming from France, they're leaving those countries and they're coming for the real Islam. They want to live at the shade of the Khalifa. So this is one way why they focus, and it's of great importance for them that they are able to get foreign fighters to the organization. Now we also mentioned something I forgot. Sorry, about the yes about the wives and the slaves. Equality among the men. By the way, the foreigners. This is why I mentioned the foreigners. The foreigners, they take a higher salary than the Syrians and the Iraqis in ISIS state. They take almost more than the double wages than what a Syrian or an Iraqi takes. Because the Syrian and the Iraqi there, he doesn't have a way to run away. He's just there. He has no option. Whether he likes it or he doesn't like it, he has to join. He would join to take money, because this could be the only source of money. But for the foreign fighter, there has to be something that brings him to this place. The place where there's no flight zone, there's nothing, there's war. Why would he come there? And actually, I've discovered that giving them weapons and women was much more important than giving them money. Because they tell them that we're going to give you weapons, very advanced weapons, and you're going to kill real people. You see, when you watch these videos of ISIS drowning people or burning the pilot, when you watch the video, I'm sure many of my colleagues in the media have watched these videos a lot. When you watch these videos, for a second you feel that this is like a movie, and then you realize that this is real. These people are really dying. It's not a movie. They're not acting. So they do give them real weapons to kill people. Regarding wives and slaves, if he can have 4 wives, I think he would like to have 15, 10 of them would be slaves. So it's just that, a way of attracting him or those men to join the group.
More questions?
Last question. For me.
Not the parking.
No, it's not about that. I'm wondering why ISIS attracted young guys from the Middle East where they were not affected by the school of Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah and Sayyid Qutb and those issues. But let's say I'm talking about experience in my village where tens of young guys went to ISIS, but they were all unemployed, unskilled, and they are not educated. So why do those people, they went to ISIS, among other people, those who were recruited to be suiciders? Like you mentioned, they are educated in Islamic methodologies.
You mean why young people in general, or why?
In general,
people
maybe
here?
I'm talking about Sunnis in Lebanon. In North Lebanon, in Akkar, in Minya, in Daniya, many young guys, they went into ISIS, and we know in my village that four young guys, they died there, they didn't came back.
Yeah.
So why do those people, they went there, even they are not educated, they are unemployed, they don't have any skills.
Because they have nothing to lose.
So it's come to the same question. Is it the attraction of the Islamic State?
Yes, they do believe in that. And this is why it gets me back to the point, it's my starting point. Those young men who are joining ISIS, they do believe that if they are Muslims, I'm talking about the born Muslim ones who live in Muslim communities, like Lebanon, let's say, in your town, those people, they do believe that this organization would bring the glories of Islam. And what explains that they don't have experience, that I remember this group, they just died the minute they entered Syria. They didn't even do anything in Syria. They just died.
They died in Talkala?
Yeah, I think, they are the ones who died in Talkala, yes.
The same group, yes.
عن أي داعي بالشمال عم تحكي؟
عم بحكي عن مني وضمني.
So, but one thing about why you see the attack that happened in London last week, it was a big surprise because the guy was 52 years old. Usually the ones who are in radical organizations, they are usually less than 40. The maximum is 40. After 40, they would not join these terrorist groups. And this guy was really of a big surprise. And his case is under study because he was 52 years old. And he was doing an attack. Or the lone wolf attacks that happened in Europe, they were not that age. They were much younger than that. Now, the reason here is that they do believe in it and they have nothing to lose. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have something to look up to. He doesn't have something to look forward to. He doesn't have a future because he doesn't know anything about his present time. For the European one, it's either that he doesn't feel he has an identity, and I spoke about that in France, or he has something very interesting he believes is waiting for him in Iraq and Syria. And basically all those, they do die there. They cannot survive.
Any more questions? Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Lorenzo, I'm a student here. Before you mentioned about the attacks in Iraq, that, for example, if the supervisor is watching the news, if the attack does not happen, he will make it happen. Yes. You said, how? What do you mean? He will detonate?
Through a mobile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He will detonate the belt on the other person.
No, usually it's more of the car.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they are more explosive than the car.
Okay.
So this is why I said that those two people, that they said that they didn't want to do the suicide attack. They ran away from the place they were in. So he knew that they were not in the same place where he sent them, and this is why he didn't do it from a far place.
Malti?
Questions on the interviews themselves. Earlier you said you didn't go to the prisons because it's not possible. So like how?
No, that was in prison. This picture was in the prison.
Okay, but like what kind of like expectations did you have from these interviews, and how what kind of methodology did you have? What kind of structure did you have behind these interviews to have any results or meaningful results out of it? And were your hypotheses or your expectations met or actually rejected? Or how did these interviews actually take place? Or was it just more like a free talk about
No, I came in as someone who was doing a study. They don't know that I'm media, and they don't know that I'm doing this research, and they don't know my name. And but I did meet them in prison. It was in Baghdad. It was not in Buka, because Buka camp prison is just closed. There is no one there. So I did meet them in prison. If I met them when they are free, I would either be in prison now or be a slave to them. So there was no way to meet them in the field. Did I get what I want from the interviews? Yes, because I had so many questions. I did believe, like many people of you, that these people were drugged. It's impossible that they do take something before they do the suicide attack. But apparently I saw that these people believe in what they're doing, and no, they don't get drugged. This was a very interesting topic for me, because nothing of what they did made sense to me. Nothing made sense of killing children and women and saying that those people would go to hell and the others would go to heaven. But apparently they had a justification for every action. And this was just, this guy, Abu Zainab, whom I had a very long interview with, he just had an answer for every question. And I do ask a lot of questions, actually. I am a pain when it comes to questions. So I asked him so many questions, and he just had an answer for everything. He even told me about stories that were really, really funny. Back 1,200 years ago, there was a guy named Abu al-Bara. And this Abu al-Bara was staying in, I'll tell you what, the suicide attacks now. How do they explain the suicide attacks? What is their justification of suicide attacks? That this guy, they put him in a cannon, a very old cannon. They put a human being in a cannon 1,200 years ago. This guy named Abu al-Bara. They put him in a cannon, and they turned the cannon, and there was a big fence, and there were people whom they were trying to attack. Now, this is this terrorist story. This is not my story. So there were people inside the fence, and it was a very high fence with a huge door, and they could not attack them. So they put him in the cannon, and they shoot him, and he went in the fence. He stood up, and he had knives, and he killed 100 people. And he apparently believed in this story. I started to laugh when he told me this. I said, if I shoot you now, or anybody shoots you outside the fence of this prison, you would die. There is no point in doing this. How did this guy get up and open the door for the other army to get in, and he took out his knives, and he killed those people? Even though it doesn't make sense to me or to us, they do believe in it, and they think it makes sense to them, that those Muslims, they were able to make all these glories. So they always have an answer for that. Even if you ask them for 24 hours, they would answer you with such nonsense.
One quick follow-up. Did you have like comparative questions you asked like each of the members, and did they have like comparative answers to that, or did each and everyone have their own story that they?
Yes, there was one of the common questions which had different answers was, don't you think that through da'wah you can get supporters instead of killing people? I mean, this is harming the image of the religion that you claim you are trying to spread. And one of them, the most educated one, said that yes, we have a problem in the da'wah, and them have to work on it more. But others believe that this is the only way to spread fear among their enemies, is through suicide attacks, to stop to stop their enemies from moving. And actually, they believe it worked. Because how do they believe it worked? The fear strategy of ISIS. ISIS members believe that it worked because this very famous video of Iraqi army dropping their weapons in the field and getting in the helicopter in Mosul and running away is the ultimate justification of fear for ISIS. That yes, because we spread the fear among our enemies, this is why the Iraqi army have dropped their weapons and they run away. So they feel that their strategy of fear, which comes through slavery, videos of drowning people, slaughtering them, burning them alive, all these things, this is part of their fear strategy.
Because there are so many differences in the answers, and because they largely rely on these kind of like funny stories, as you just
No, actually,
it's less about like a common ideology, rather about like an empowerment and giving these like unskilled youth, for example, the first chance to or this stage of having power and exercising this power, rather than actually having an ideology they strongly believe in and they fight for like a religious reason.
Actually, no. The difference between the answers is that because many of them were not as educated on the ideology as each other. This was my own analysis to this, because some of them had a lot of justifications for this strategy, and many of them said that we don't know. Some of them said, I don't know, I was sent on operations and I was told to do that, and I simply did it. So it's not because they're lying. I mean, they are liars, I'm not defending them, but it's because they don't have the same education on the ideology of their organization like others. This is what makes the difference between their answers.
One last question from Aman.
Hi, I'm Aman. I'm an intern here at the Institute. So you spent a lot of time approaching the ISIS phenomenon from an ideological or theological perspective, and just a few seconds ago talking about the allure of violence, and these things are all justified. But I guess my question is, did you ever ask any questions on tribal identity and the role tribal identity played in mobilizing people toward ISIS?
Actually, the interesting role of tribal identity that was played in Iraq was during the Sahwa with Al-Qaeda. After that, the role of the tribe, if this is something related to your question about the role of the tribe in Iraq, right? Am I right on understanding? Because this is where the tribal role is, basically, it's more in Iraq. And during the Sahwa, the tribes, they played a very important role in getting those members in Al-Qaeda to leave the organization and come back to the tribes, and they would accept them again. But after that, the role of the tribes, because there was no agreement between the tribes and the government. There's a very big clash between the Arabic tribes in Iraq and their own government. Now, meantime, while we are talking, this problem is being tackled with Haidar al-Abadi. But before that, with Maliki, no, they were totally against the state. For them, the state is Maliki. And Maliki is bringing Iran, and Iran is running Iraq. Nowadays, this is why the Iraqi military is able to take over territories in Mosul, because it's cooperating with the Arabic tribes. But it was not able to do that before, because the Arabic tribes they didn't get any deal from the government that they will give them weapons, because before they were not giving them weapons. I'm sure you've heard it a lot before, that the Sunnah in Iraq, the tribes, they don't have weapons, and the government, the Shia have all the weapons. I'm sure you've heard this before. So, but now it's different. There is a deal, and this is why the Iraqi military is definitely unable to take over the territories from ISIS if the Arabic tribes don't cooperate with them. Otherwise, the Peshmerga would continue on taking over the land, and they would definitely not give anything back to Baghdad. And they will not.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. I think you may want to wrap it up in a quick conclusion. Who are these people? We understand that they have different motives for joining ISIS. These groups have different motives. Some of them are psychopaths. Some of them are really convinced of what they are doing, and they do believe that they have an apocalyptic, they are seeing an apocalyptic version of some state happening in front of them. Some others are frustrated politically, and they felt marginalized under this or that political regime. So how do you want to comment? To wrap it up, what makes people join Daesh? What are the main motives for people to join Daesh in Syria, in the stronghold, in Syria and Iraq? Because as I understood from what you were saying, the foreign fighters have different motives. The lone wolves have very different motives. So let's only talk about the stronghold of Daesh.
Okay, so when it comes to Iraq and Syria, why do people join ISIS? They either join ISIS because they have no choice, because ISIS is the only strong organization that is running this part.
Between Syria and Iraq.
Yes, between, in this part,
this border,
in this area where it's mostly Sunnah,
yeah.
The only strong organization running there is not the state, it's ISIS.
Yeah.
And usually people follow the stronger. They don't follow the weak one. The weak one, which is the state. And this is why Many of them, they join ISIS, and it's not coming out of choice. I mean, I cannot answer it simply by saying that, oh, they don't have choice. They are giving them money. They are giving them women. They are giving them power. When you give them money and women, you give them power. Power which they lack, because in both countries, in Syria and Iraq, the regimes are not Sunni regimes. And the Sunnah over there, they feel that they are oppressed. So now, many of them are part of this crime going on there. It's not that I'm defending them, but this is the general feeling of the Sunnah, the regime in Syria and Iraq is not a Sunni regime. And the Sunnah in Syria and Iraq, they feel that they are oppressed by a regime that is not a Sunni. And you're not dealing with very, very educated people who believe in the role of the state, or they know the role of the state.
Even if they are educated in Syria, you know, the head of the regime has done war crimes, so it doesn't really have to do if
And
they are
the war-
educated
and the
or
war
not. There are war
crimes.
crimes done by the Syrian regime in Syria.
Exactly.
So
This
this
is why
must explain it somehow, no?
it does explain it, because the state is not there. The Syrian state or the Iraqi state as a state organization.
So before this whole Daesh thing appeared, there was a vacuum of power. There was a void of power.
There was no
These
void of
areas
power.
were
There was a void of
marginalized.
belonging.
Okay.
There is no sense of belonging to the state among these regions.
Okay.
They don't feel that they belong to the state, whether it was in Iraq. The Iraqi Sunnah after 2003, they feel that they are out of power.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel that they do share the power with the Shia. And actually what the Sunnah were doing to the Shia before with Saddam, the Shia were doing it to the Sunnah after Saddam. And the Sunnah there, they don't feel that they do belong. They feel that they are out of the power. There are many Iraqi prime ministers who were part of this conclusion or part of this feeling among the Sunnah. The major one was al-Maliki. But the main thing is that they feel that they don't belong. With Syria, it's a more complicated thing also. There in Iraq and Syria of the tribal society as well. The tribal society has a very big role in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they would come to a tribe, and if the sheikh of the tribe says yes, there are thousands who would join. It's not a matter of asking them, or there's no democracy in these organizations. What I want to say is that when you think of these terrorist organizations, don't think about them in the common sense way that we think, because they do lack a lot of common sense. For us, everything that we do doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to kill children and to slave women, but for them, it makes sense because they have a justification. And even though they don't believe, I mean, he's not taking this justification for himself. He's taking this justification for people like me and you to join the group. He doesn't need this, he doesn't need this justification for the ones in Syria and Iraq. This magazine, the Dabiq, which is in English, they don't do it for the Syrians and the Iraqis. They do it for those outside the Syria and Iraq. Because it's so easy to run the state in Syria and Iraq, but it's very hard to get people from outside this region to join the organization.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.